I'm making this recording because the previous recording cut off short, and it actually missed out the last two slides. So, those last two slides were on forward guidance. So, I just wanted to use this opportunity to go through unconventional monetary policy again and just re-emphasize what it is you need to know. So, there are three types of unconventional monetary policy, but I guess at a higher level you need to understand that under the monetary policy umbrella there is traditional monetary policy, which in Australia is the manipulation of interest rates to try to control inflation and keep it within the 2 to 3% target band. You also need to understand that conventional monetary policy is targeted at the exchange rate in both Singapore and Hong Kong. So you need to understand the differences in the way that traditional monetary policy can operate. So that's one side of the monetary policy topic, and the other side of the monetary policy topic is unconventional monetary policy, which has really come to the forefront, and it's been quite a popular topic of debate and discussion since the global financial crisis, really. Now, the three different types of unconventional monetary policy that we have seen from central banks around the world, the major one is quantitative easing. The second one is negative interest rate policy, and the third one is forward guidance. So in terms of this particular course, quantitative easing is the most important, simply because it has been the one that central banks have relied on the most to supplement the effects of conventional monetary policy. So QE, definitely the most important. And in the last presentation I spent quite a lot of time going through QE and explaining what it is and its intended effects as well. Now, like all topics in this course, you shouldn't restrict your understanding to what is discussed in these lectures and in class. You need to read widely on these topics and do your own research. Negative interest rate policy, I've already discussed that. So we'll go down to forward guidance. Now, I've already discussed forward guidance on one of the previous presentations. But in terms of your understanding of forward guidance, sort of 15 minutes of reading will be enough to arm you with the type of information that you need. So perhaps read through these slides, go away, do your own reading on forward guidance, just so that you've got an idea of what it is, so that you can write about it under the broader umbrella of unconventional monetary policy. So you may get a question such as, what are the different ways that central banks can use monetary policy to try to stimulate economic activity? If the question isn't specific, then it would sort of lend itself towards talking about both conventional and unconventional monetary policy, and forward guidance could be a one way that the central bank, or one technique the central bank could use to stimulate economic activity by having people borrow and spend more. So in terms of forward guidance, if we move on to this, what is forward guidance and how does it work? Now, I've really included this slide just to show you that it was used by the Federal Reserve in the US in December 2012, and it was something quite novel. It's something that economies around the world hadn't seen before. So forward guidance, unlike QE that had been occurring in Japan for quite a number of years prior to the start of the GFC, and quantitative easing was something that even the Australian Central Bank, the Reserve Bank, had spoken about 10-15 years ago as a possibility if it ever really needed to stimulate economic activity, and if conventional monetary policy wasn't powerful enough. Not that a QE has been used in Australia, but the Central Bank of Australia has spoken about the possibility of using it if it ever needed to. So QE has been around for quite some time, whereas forward guidance is something quite novel. And I was really just providing this slide here to give you a little bit of context around the whole forward guidance issue. So it is something that really started in early 2013, and so it's been going on for a number of years now. Now, in terms of forward guidance, this final slide in this topic is once again just providing you with a little bit of a framework, and it is quite self-explanatory, but a little bit of a framework to think about how forward guidance can be implemented. So at a very high level, forward guidance can either be calendar-based or outcome-based. So calendar-based is, for example, the central bank coming out and saying we're going to keep interest rates at these record low, say 1% levels, until the end of, say, 2018. Or it could be calendar-based, or under calendar-based it can be quite explicit, like interest rates will be on hold until the end of 2018, or it can be quite vague, such as interest rates will be at these record low levels that they're currently at for some extended period. It could be the wording could be some extended period, it could be for 2 to 3 years, or roughly 2 to 3 years. But the whole idea of forward guidance is that you are trying to give businesses and consumers some sort of indication that interest rates will remain low for some extended period. Now normally forward guidance would only be used when you are trying to stimulate economic activity. They certainly wouldn't be needed when you're trying to rein in economic activity, because conventional monetary policy is generally quite successful at slowing down spending. All you need to do is raise interest rates, and eventually interest rates will reach a level which will put a halt to people's spending. So on the upside, if you're trying to slow economic activity, rising interest rates at some point will always work. But if you're trying to stimulate economic activity, sometimes you can lower the policy interest rate. In Australia it's the cash rate down to 0, and people still won't be confident enough at those low interest rates to borrow and spend money. In that case you then have to move to unconventional monetary policy. So going back to this, with calendar-based guidance as to how long interest rates will be low, they can be vague or they can be explicit. With the outcomes-based, you are more looking at a statement such as, we will keep interest rates low until and this is just an example, we will keep interest rates low until the unemployment rate hits, say, 5%. That is something that the central bank could come out and say. They are the types of words that the central bank could use. Or the central bank could come out and say, we will keep interest rates low at these record low levels of, say, 1%, until the unemployment rate is substantially lower than the current level. That's quite a vague statement. You don't know what target unemployment rate the central bank is thinking about compared to the explicit target. And I won't really worry about focusing on the forward-looking or the history-dependent target. You can do a little bit of reading on those if you like, but I think for this course, if we just understand the difference between calendar-based and outcome-based forward guidance, and that under each of those we've got vague and explicit statements, then that will certainly that'll certainly be enough. Really moving into things such as the Evans rule and the GDP target is really beyond the scope of this course. So feel free to do a little bit of reading about the Evans rule and history-dependent forward guidance measures, but it really is going a little bit too far. For this course, we simply need to understand down to the vague, explicit row. Okay, so that said, with forward guidance, just keep in mind it is part of, if we go right back up to the top here, it's part of unconventional monetary policy. You certainly need to do most of your work on QE and less work on NIRP and forward guidance. Really, for negative interest rate policy and forward guidance, just understanding what they are is enough for this course, and a little bit of understanding about how they can stimulate, or how they're likely to stimulate economic activity. So sort of a definition of each of 2 and 3 and how they are likely to affect economic activity. With QE1, you need to understand that in more detail.